Conservation is really what got me to be a professor. It goes all the way back, like for a lot of us that it does, of just time spent with family. I spent a lot of time with my dad in the grasslands of Kansas, and it really gave me an opportunity to experience them, understand their value, appreciate them, and that just became a lifelong career and something that's near and dear to my heart. So Kansas is right next to Nebraska. We share a lot of the same challenges and issues. And the more that we communicate across states, the more we realize what we're in against, some of the broader challenges. We more rapidly learn what one group might have done that didn't work or worked better than somewhere else. And so that information exchange across states has actually been really valuable. But also, grasslands, they're one of the really unique, special, major vegetation types of the world. They've lost more than any other biome, more than tropical rainforests, systems like that. And that's not something every citizen that lives here knows. So there's a lot of work that we still have to do in terms of educating on why they're valuable, what the major threats are, and how we're starting to have better success on those kind of issues. Eastern red cedar, is kind of the poster child for what's happening with woody encroachment. Historically, it was more of a rare plant, and when it's, like a lot of things, when they're rare, and cedar's used for like windbreaks and wind protection and so forth, incredibly valuable. It's when things that are rare scale up to large landscapes or multiple counties, or in this case, we're talking about spread across the entire biome, where something that's rare and has benefit, all of a sudden you're starting to see the consequences because it's impacting other land use types. So yeah, Eastern red cedar is the most broadly distributed conifer in North America. It stretches all the way over from here to Canada and so forth to the East Coast. And it's a really fire sensitive species. So its control mechanism was fire. And so indigenous groups burned the prairies. That's how prairies here and elsewhere in the world thrived, was with frequent applications of fire. Of course, the Flint Hills of Kansas are one of the legacies of that in North America and why you still see a lot of open prairies here. But not just that, it also we changed its dispersal. We changed its ability to how rapidly it could move landscapes because it was one of the most planted woody species in the entire country. So when you remove its kind of natural enemy, fire, and then you have widespread planting campaigns, and all of that occurred without knowledge of modern ecology and what it could mean to grasslands. And that's just something we're reconciling today. It's a relatively easy plant to manage, but it's so prolific and spreads so quickly, and the costs do get high if you wait. So increasingly, it's a poster child for getting ahead of invasions or woody encroachment, not just from Eastern red cedar, but from other species that we know have certain consequences that we want to avoid in certain landscapes. Yeah, so for several years, things like woody encroachment, especially with things like Eastern red cedar, or if you go out west in sagebrush country, their big thing is cheatgrass. So you hear about these, what we call impossible challenges in rangeland ecosystems. And these are two of the biggest ones. Cheatgrass out west, woody encroachment here. So the big part of that was building awareness of just people understanding the scale of it. And it's one thing to have a local issue that you can manage on your own property, but with things like woody encroachment, what happens around you influences your property and your area. So to scale up and address that requires increased private lands collaboration, increased support from our natural resource agency professionals and university scientists. And so a lot of that has been historically on me talking about awareness. What this presentation also starts to point to is that groups of landowners have banded together trying to meet that call, and just how are they customizing their approach on how to manage this issue at scale. Because imagining that multiple private landowners are coming together to say, we need to collectively address this problem under a shared vision is not something you hear about a lot from grasslands. But that's what it's going to take, and so that's what I'm pointing to in this talk, is a future where that is happening already across several regions of Kansas, other surrounding states. How can we better support that as part of our business of grassland conservation here? And that's really what we can build around. We build around success. We build around actual demonstrations, not just, hey, here's what we're losing because our grasslands are so rapidly getting converted or rapidly getting encroached upon. One aspect of conservation is that we struggle to understand what the obstacles are that really affect the ability to implement, say, certain science or knowledge. It's not just about that knowledge, it's about certain obstacles that affect a producer's ability to have the capacity or the resources to actually achieve their goals. So part of that is just a better understanding of what conservation really looks like on private lands. oftentimes what happens is when we fund conservation for a landowner, hey, here's a check or whatever else to help incentivize this type of management. But you have one or a couple ranchers or landowners or their family then managing that and everything else they're doing. Usually what we do is we have workforce support that actually gets jobs done on the ground. So we're continuing to increase where it's not just an errand to the people that have land, where not only are they doing this for their livelihood, usually associated with like ranching income, whether that's beef or wildlife, but there's a number of other ecosystem services that we desire. And it's not like, the 1980s anymore. Like, they have asked for increased help of actually getting the job done, not just, oh, thanks for the cash or thanks for that incentive. So one aspect is just, we need to get more involved. And I also think another big area is tied to general education. We communicate so much about conservation globally, especially with forests, and they've done an incredible job over the last century of building that out. Grasslands should follow some of that example, and how can we better communicate the importance and value of grasslands and just get that into the general public? Because the loss of grasslands does impact, like I talked about in my presentation, metro areas, whether that's Topeka, here in Wichita, Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska. Our metro areas are impacted because of what's happening in these areas, whether that's increase in wildfire danger, certain water-related issues, food production, biodiversity. There's things that affect us in those metro areas that we take for granted. And we haven't told that story as well. And that's that story of conservation that we need to get out there more. I think it's being able to see certain ideas and concepts resonate with landowners and seeing how they decide to own it themselves, how they apply it. So yeah, that whole co-production and seeing that materialize at scale, especially some of the groups that have a history of prescribed fire and controlled burning, like certain areas of Kansas do. It's how that ecosystem was historically managed and everything as well. There's a key thing that fire does that other things don't do. And I'll often tell students, or when people ask me this question, the general public, if you can show how to actually scale up fire, which is one of the most hated forces of nature on the planet, and how that can be appreciated, we can do that with almost anything. So when we're talking about how do we better conserve natural resources, whatever sector that might be, grassland, forests, wetlands, you name it, if you can show conservation success with fire on private lands as part of some of these issues, we can do it with lots of things. And so it gives hope to some of like the challenges we're facing with natural resource sustainability today. I think, yeah, the excitement comes a little bit from watching our ability to see. You can see there's a sense of changing how we identify with and recognize grasslands and being able to communicate that and really justify this whole approach. So I think that's a big part of something that excites me, is you can see that people are changing maybe how they see the end goal of like, what's a grassland look like to you? And it can mean many things to a lot of groups and at a lot of scales, but at least we're starting to pick our feet up. Often we were looking at just what's in the prairie or in our grasslands, and we're starting to get a sense of like, well, I see it through these kind of open horizons and the sense of grandeur and scale. Somebody else sees it through a lot of structural variability on the landscape. Somebody else through like high pollinator diversity and plant diversity on an area. There's just more of that coming together that's exciting to see. And so that means we should be able to represent this story better in the next couple of years of just look at what some different groups are accomplishing as their vision for what grasslands maybe should look like is changing. So that's exciting.